involved in that. So I come with a very practical reason is that I see that teachers cannot write, and I find that writing reflective journals is very useful for giving them to review what happened in the classroom and to record something, problems, important, that they will not, they will able to remember to find the solutions. For me, that is very good. So, but why teacher resistance to that? So that's why I come here to find the answers. Thank you.
Joyce, do you have any thoughts on that question about, I'm sure you watched the undergraduate presentations in the morning, and yeah, your perspective from postgraduate stance.
Sure. I think you need to work with both, because you need to know the rules in order to break them. So if you're coming from a place where you don't know the rules, then your work is not going to be accepted because you're going to be marked against a criteria. So if you are going to work outside of that criteria, it's not going to be accepted or recognized as work that's academic. So I felt that for me, coming from a bicultural perspective, where I bring with me my Asian education into Australia, that I'm constantly challenging the boundaries, that balances between new knowledge and how I write or how I think in Asia and presenting in the Western concept or Western academic concept. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that, Joyce. Do we have any other questions from the floor for the panellists, or Joyce, who's in Malaysia? Skype again. Thank
you. I'm interested in, as a student with English as a second background, how aware are you of students who have English as their first language also having difficulty with academic communication when they first start their studies at university? And do you find support from them, or do you end up finding support from other international students?
Can we just ask Joyce first, so she doesn't always feel like she's class cap off for
Joyce, did you hear that question?
Yeah, I did. Now, it's a great question because I've lived in Australia for a good 15, 20 years now, and when I went back to do my postgraduate studies this time, academic help was given to international students, but I actually attended some of those sessions, and I felt that even as a first language speaker of English, those sessions were incredibly helpful because it's not so much about knowing the language, but knowing how to use them in an academic way. So I think it's very valid, and I think universities should consider that. There was a question earlier in the first session where someone said, well, how is it that the universities don't offer that course as a first-year option? So I think it's valid that universities should consider that, because I definitely benefited from it. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce.
Yes, thank you very much for your question. I found that when last semester I was a tutor for a particular unit. What I find with local students and originally English-speaking students is that they have a lot of street use of English. I mean, the jargons, they use a lot of street language that they are used to. And they feel very free and confident to express themselves in so many ways. In our case, growing up in Ghana, for example, English was compulsory in basic school, and those who were found speaking any local language were punished, and I'm saying it again, punished. Starting from being caned, a stick, through to being given a big portion of grass to weed. So when you see young children weeding on the school compound, it might mean they spoke their local language. So you see the kind of environment within which we studied English, with a lot of coercion. So you dare not make mistakes. We still do make mistakes, but But that is the kind of environment we have come from. So I find that to be the difference, the contextual difference that we have with local students. They have a lot more freedom to use because the language is theirs. They can have that freedom to do that. And I think it is an area that maybe educators should pay attention to. Thank you.
Thank you. I was once attend a 3-minute thesis competition in my faculty. It's a challenge for me, but I just realized at that time that I was too not, international students only, and the rest is the local English students, which is mainly the English is the main mother tongue or first languages. And then I did present it well, the idea, and then the winner is I was the bottom list. I realized that my supervisor was a bit she didn't agree with that, and asked the panel, why can't you pick at least my students like in number 5? And then the panel said, you know, the problem is about English. Even her argument is good, but her English again compete with the local, well, what you want to choose. This is to represent university, faculty. So who else is better? And I say, okay, that's the reality. So for me, I don't find that the local students have problem with English in mechanics sense, mechanically, like writing. But for me, they also, I share in my thesis writing group, I listen that they also struggles to get a good idea, sound idea. So for me, that is also their problem. So that's about that.
I'll give you a couple of perspectives from me as a student and me as a teaching associate. Me as a student, when I came to Australia, I noticed that international students are very gregarious, especially from the same country context. So what I've been doing myself, I would have been avoiding Italian people like the devil in the hot water. You know? I have to speak English, and that is what I did. Apart from that, I noted that sometimes it can be difficult to interact with the locals, mostly because they assume that you would understand everything they say. They just speak normally, like they would with everybody, without sometimes considering that you have some problem. Another thing is that when you make mistakes, and you know you're making mistakes, it is more useful to have a person that tries to correct you all of the time for our annoying. And I particularly praised and appreciated people that did that with me, that ended up being international students. Anyway, as a teaching associate, I noticed that especially students from, I guess, Indonesia, China, and other backgrounds like this, but also sometimes from Italy too, they will grow up in a context, in a university context, in which you don't challenge the person that is speaking, the lecturer or the teaching associate. And so I had to work very hard with them. And sometimes, even at the cost of looking like I'm picking on them, try to extract a few words about that perspective and making sure, look, it's fine. Say it the way you can. You know, if I really don't understand, I will just ask you questions to make sure that I'm understanding what you're saying. And little by little, they gained a little confidence, and towards the end of the course, they would make some intervention, and that was very rewarding.
Thank you very much for that. Do we have any other questions? Okay, thank you. Joyce, are you happy to go first again?
No, I haven't got any question. Actually, I just want to share my solidarity with Andy during her presentation, that when she spoke about how when she learns about new ideas, that she forgets to think of them critically because she's enjoying those new ideas. So even though I've sort of assimilated into the Australian university culture, I have to say that the Asianness within me still struggles with that. So there are moments where I'm getting new ideas and I go, hang on, I've got to put on that thinking cap, that critical thinking cap. So it doesn't occur naturally. It's something that I have to remind myself to do all the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Joyce. Sorry, question.
Yeah, I thought they were terrific presentations, and I particularly liked Clifford's anecdote about the 8:30. I just wanted to ask, as a lecturer, I'm really keen to improve how I do things. Have you guys got some practical tips for your lecturing staff, and you can say whatever you like?
Joyce, would you like to respond to that?
I'll let somebody else have the floor first.
Yes, thank you very much, Simon. I think we do have quite a number of tips. As Andy said in her presentation, you see that sometimes the comments given in your work are also not explained. So it's so difficult to act on them or try to improve your work using those comments. So I think that the first is that engagement, as in painstakingly, gradually taking us through what you mean by each and every word that you say. That's one. I think the second thing is the kind of environment created, because most of us are coming from environments where we don't question our professors and our lecturers. So maybe a little more cup of tea here and there will bring us around. We come around as we continue to, because I have so much difficulty calling my lecturers and professors with their first name. And when I do that, call them with other names, they resist, and it even makes me a bit nervous. So I think a little more friendlier environment will let us come around. And the last one, to allow people to come in, I think will be to begin to do presentations together. Presentations together, publications together will let us begin to learn how you do your things and begin to follow quite effectively. Thank you very much.
I tend to see that for me, giving new ideas is very difficult when we're not exposing them to the reality. So what I sharing is very good stuff. Sharing is a very good thing. I was doing my master in 2002. It's about professional development in female teachers in my context. What does it mean to be professional for female? I learned that, and I realized that what is the thing that interesting that I'd like to share. And then I noticed that it's not from me only, but maybe let the teachers share. I am an educator, I'm not a teacher. I mean, I work in the university. There's a distance gap knowledge there that maybe educators cannot maybe understand the classroom. So what I expose the teachers is that sharing from the teachers who already travel around the world with the scholarship, and then I put them together and tell the stories, real stories. I mean, not something from the book, but something from the teacher's eyes. Teachers traveling from Singapore, from Japan, who knows about the class, share to the teachers in the local, and then teachers really like that. So that's the things that I share. Thank you.
Just running a bit short on time, so if Alberta and Joyce could respond to some final comments.
I had a little comment.
Yeah.
I found useful the approach of my public law professor during my undergrad. He was from the United Kingdom, teaching in Italy. He would still run in a very top-down way the class to try to ease us into a different context. But at the beginning of the lecture, he would ask randomly a student, can you make a brief summary of what happened in the previous lecture? You know, just 1 minute at most. And that would have been helping people get out of the shell. Eventually they would say, no, I'm sorry, I was not there. But still they would have been speaking. Otherwise, what I used to do myself would have been to study a little bit the students that are enrolled and that I have to supervise, and try to understand where do they come from, you know, to change a little bit my presenting style in a way to make more or less everybody happy, in a way to try to move everybody towards the same direction, which is what I like the most, a very interactive type of class, where I never stay behind the desk, I just cannot. I have to go walk around like if it was theater, but that is me.
Thank you. Joyce, do you have any final comments?
Yes, so I'd like lecturers to enhance intercultural understanding in the classroom, because I feel that there's very little integration within the classroom. It may have to happen outside, but it can also happen within the classroom, because the differencing of the other, essentially international students and the likes, make it a daunting environment for the other to feel accepted or feel safe enough to make comments or participate in class.
Great, thank you very much for that. I guess I have the pleasure of welcoming Professor Zlatko onto the stage. He's the Vice Provost of Graduate Learning here at Monash University, and I would like to so thank you very much for coming out.
Thank you so very much for the opportunity to come along and to say a few words. And can I just say how enormously I enjoyed this conversation. Unfortunately, I only joined in at the end of this session. That was not my original intent, but unfortunately I was at a series of meetings this morning. Actually, I'm going to say something that I didn't prepare. Listening to this conversation really brought me back. It took me back 20 more years ago when I came to Australia as a PhD student. And some of the things that you talked about, and Clifford, I think you mentioned some of the things that just so clearly resonated with my own experience. Clearly English is, as you can hear, not my first language. And I do remember the traumas that I have been through as a student when I came to Australia. I was not that I was not able to communicate, I was fundamentally shy and lacking confidence to engage in most basic everyday conversations. And this is the kind of fear and anxiety that stays with you for a very long time. And if you catch me on a big day, when I'm tired, exhausted, or maybe not 100% well, you know, all these feelings often come back. So, look, thank you so very much for the opportunity to listen in to these conversations. I would like to say that this forum today was about plagiarism and language, and I only heard you mostly speak about the language, so I will return to the point, I'll make some comments about plagiarism as well. But I love the idea of this gathering, of this symposium. I think it is really wonderful that to see these sorts of bottom-up initiatives occur, and it is really wonderful to see both undergraduate students, postgraduate students, colleagues students from Malaysia, academic staff to actually engage in this sort of conversation. I will make a few reflections on this on this topic, on the topic of this symposium, because it resonates with me both personally, as I have already revealed, but also professionally. Now, as far as personal resonance is concerned, I already mentioned that as an international student, I've shared many of the experiences that have been talked about. You know, the very fact that I could not call my supervisor by first name. It took me exactly 3 years and something to actually change the tune and stop calling Professor Holton, but rather call him Bob, like everybody else who's half normal would. But it took enormous amount of effort and enormous amount of cultural translation and adaptation to actually get to that point. It wasn't easy. The confidence building was slow, very, very slow. And I do remember challenges all along the way. I do remember in my department at Flinders, they ran out of tutors suitable tutors. So I got the opportunity to actually give a few tutorials. I was paralyzed with fear because I had to tutor on a topic that I was quite familiar with intellectually, but I never spoke publicly on the topic. I also remember getting my first job interview. I had no idea what to expect. Now somehow, miraculously, I actually got that job. But let me assure you, it wasn't an easy experience. But also, this debate resonates with me as still an active researcher. There are lots of pressure on academics these days to produce continuously and produce a lot. And this poses some real challenges, and the temptation to kind of take shortcuts or to make a genuine mistake in the process, that possibility is actually very real. And this brings me to my final comment, and that is about how this resonates with me professionally. Now, as Vice Provost Graduate Education, I belong to the dark side, and unfortunately, I see some of the plagiarism cases from the other side of the spectrum, and it ain't pretty. It ain't pretty. I have dealt with cases of PhD students who submitted their thesis and were caught out by examiners. The traumas experienced by the student and the supervisory team were absolutely enormous. So I think, because I see these things quite regularly, all too frequently, I would really like to emphasize just how important it is to have this kind of grassroots discussion about plagiarism and about all those cultural aspects of a student experience that is so often unspoken, and so often we simply assume that things happen, that conversations do occur, and that those conversations are understood. Nothing could be further from the truth. So, thinking about the topic of this conversation and listening in on some of the discussion, I think it is really, really important that we as members of this university community really put some of these issues at the center of the way in which we think about the university community. University community is almost like a live organism. It brings together so many different individual faiths, so many different individual cultures, different background experiences. It's a microcosmos of so many different things. And very often we tend to forget, in the process of being and living in this community, this vibrant and dynamic and big and heterogeneous community, we tend to forget about some of the most basic things. And that is that we all engage in a continuous process of translation, as teachers, as students, as administrators. And very often we just, for a moment sometimes, forget about how critical it is that we do translate and we do listen carefully. Because sometimes we say things we don't want to, sometimes our correspondents are saying things or write things that they didn't intend to say. And I think we just need to develop sensitivity and some degree of tolerance for and accommodate some of that difference as we encounter it. Now, this is probably the most challenging part of our job. But as a university, I think we need to communicate very clearly what the expectations are. And that communication doesn't always occur, and it doesn't always occur at the appropriate level. But unless we actually make it clear what the academic, social and cultural expectations are, embedded in university life, I think we fail each other, not just students, but ourselves as well. Look, can I just say, I have a privilege of saying a few final words, so can I just say my heartfelt thanks for the opportunity to come along. Can I just say my warm congratulations to those students and staff who have been involved in bringing us all together. And may I wish you a good day and good study career. Thank you.
I'd just ask you to present a few tokens of appreciation to the presenters.
So, where did I start?
I'm not sure why not.
Fantastic, congratulations. Well done. Thank you. Congratulations. Well done. Joyce, I don't know how to do this. I've never done this before. But let me assure you, I've got something. It looks pretty, and it will
I'll
be
believe you.
Thank you so very much.
Thanks.
Just before we conclude, I'll give the microphone to Matthew, but from my side, can I just thank again to all the students, to Anna, to Alberto, to technical skills, organizational skills, and also to Matthew, who's driven these from the very beginning and has involved students and staff in such a professional way and actually displayed his commitment to the task. Also thank you to Andrew for a wonderful keynote address. We thoroughly enjoyed it and brought all these discussions together, and I do hope that this is only the first of many gatherings as a mission statement, because it was a wonderful experience. So thank you to everyone.
Thank you.
I have the pleasure of announcing the symposium has finished. Thank you very much. And lunch is served, and we'd be very disappointed if, please, you leave without sharing some moments with the presenters and enjoying the lunch. And thank you so much, Martin and Zlatko, for coming along today.